At the end of every unit, your teacher has the chance to teach a lesson about other lessons and their context to enhance. But what do you suppose our teacher has us do? He skips the lesson and makes us present a digital LEQ. Elocution needs historical evidence, reasoning that can corroborate and advance a complex thesis that John P. Irish would admire. Then we drop the screencast like the single that is fire. Students created screencasts for you to like, subscribe, and share. We know you've had all the John Green and Steve Heimler you can bear. If we have the most views by 10 p.m. Eastern, we earn 500 bonus points which guarantees an A. Without much more fanfare or ado, we present our digital LEQ. The topic our group will be discussing is the effects of imperialism on the economy and governance in different countries.
Our thesis states, within 1750 to the 1900s, major industrialized nations imperialized undeveloped countries to modernize those countries and benefit themselves. However, countries responded differently in response to imperialism, which caused them different outcomes economically and in government. Therefore, the responses from imperialized countries to imperialism turned out differently economically and in governance from other countries that were imperialized. So our topic is the effects of imperialism on the economy and the governance. And our big idea questions are, why did the countries react to the imperialism the way they did? And what would be the best way to react to imperialism? Our contextualization are as follows. Spreading technology, ideas, and forcing countries to adjust were how major imperialist powers influenced underdeveloped countries during 1750 to 1900s. Imperialist powers at the time were Americans and Europeans. India, China, and Japan were the main countries in Asia, and lastly, causing countries to change dramatically. India had immense potential for profit, so that's how the British people initially started to imperialize them. But then, since Britain was in the Industrial Revolution at the time, they started to demand more from the market goods in the country. This was against the development of India, so Britain put all sorts of restrictions on them to curb their economy. By 1850, almost all of India was under control of the British. All of this affected India negatively, but mainly because Britain attempted to convert them into Christians. The British Raj was the period of British rule on the Indian subcontinent. They were able to do this through the East India Company. This company established itself by gaining permission from local authorities, and with all of this happening, the British Parliament began regulating the company through successive India Acts in the 1770s, resulting the country of Bengal under the British control. As you can see, this primary source was from the time period it happened in, which was 1858. This image was taken from the newspaper called the Delhi Gazette. The purpose of this was to boost the morale of British forces. They called this revolt the Indian Mutiny. This revolt was meant to have the chance to disconnect Indian rulers and try to overthrow British rule. Unfortunately, it was taken down by the British forces with the help of Indian leaders who supported British rule.
China became a primary economic interest to the U.S. because they saw it as a market in which they could sell goods as well as linking trade with the rest of Asia. Because many other countries were looking to capitalize China, the spheres of influence was then established. The spheres of influence divided China up into a number of spherical zones, each being dominated by a different external power. Because the spheres of influence limited U.S. access to the Chinese market, and the U.S. wanted to prevent any of the other countries from colonizing China, the open door policy was established in 1899, which allowed all other countries to have equal access trade to China. The first open door note was written by Secretary of State John Hayes in 1899, addressing American policy towards China. Explaining the open door policy to different countries, it was to promote and support the idea that all foreign countries should have equal trading rights. The policy asked that they will no way interfere with any treaty port or any vested interest within any so-called sphere of interest, or least territory it may have in China. The countries and their responses wanted to wait for other replies because each country didn't want to act unless they knew what the others were thinking and if they could all come to an agreement. Hayes interpreted this response as a sign that they would all comply, but each country continued to compete for trade and mining rights, which then led to the open door policy being a failure. The open door policy cartoon represents different countries around China. These different countries wanted to compete against pieces of China or territories of China because they wanted to be able to trade within their country.
Since 1639, the Tokugawa shogunate made Japan an isolationist country by expelling all outsiders except for some Dutch and some Chinese. There were stories for how stranded Americans got harshly treated by the Japanese, and over 3 years, Commodore Matthew Perry traveled to Japan and back to the U.S. to create bonds and expose them to their technology. He first got Japan to come to an agreement to protect shipwrecked or stranded Americans and to open one or more ports for supplies and refueling. Later in 1854, he got the Japanese to agree to the Treaty of Kanagawa, where Japan would protect some stranded seamen and open 2 ports for refueling and provisioning American ships. This is where the imperialism began. After the ports opened, the Japanese people became influenced by all the technology and ideas that were brought over. There were 2 anti-Tokugawa clans, the Chonsu and the Satsuma, that combined to topple the Tokugawa shogunate. The 2 clans declared an imperial restoration in name of the young Emperor Meiji, which they called the Meiji Restoration. This launched a civil war where the 2 clans won and started to evolve Japan to become a world-class industrial and military power. The Civil War started because of the American influence, and the clan wanted to change, and it resulted in government giving power back to the emperor and open up the country to trade with other countries. The image is a picture of the Japanese soldiers during the First Sino-Japanese War. The image shows the evolution of Japan's military and their modernization from the Restoration. Before they had salaried samurais, and now at this point you can see they have uniforms and guns which are similar to the other imperialist powers. The imperialist knowledge allowed their military to evolve so much that they became an imperialist power that won many wars.
To compare and contrast the different countries, similarly, they were all not open to being imperialized, but through imperialism they were all restructured in order to quote-unquote help their economy. The differences between each country was that China's economy was weakened through the force of opened ports. Japan benefited and became their own imperialist power later on, and eventually learned from China's mistakes and opened up ports willingly, even though they didn't want to. India was also only forced to trade with Britain. Our theme analysis consists of Theme 4, Economic Systems, because through imperialism it changed the economy through trade. Theme 5, Social Interactions and Organizations, because through the open door policy different countries were able to trade with China, as well as countries interacting with other countries through trade of goods and ideas. Theme 6, Technology and Innovation, because of the spread of ideas and goods caused the underdeveloped countries to get new technology from the industrialized nations and innovate. To reflect back on our big idea questions at the beginning of our presentation, India was interested in Britain, which was demanding more of their products, allowing Britain to impose more rules which led them to imperialize and control India. China was divided into spheres of influence by other imperialist powers, also given the open door policy, leading them to lose control with foreign trade. As China tried to stand up for themselves, they were too weak, and imperialist powers could do whatever they wanted. Japan witnessed what happened to China, causing them to be more cautious and open to their imperialism, so they would not lose their culture. This was also their advantage to grow themselves to a future imperialist power. As Japan reacted to imperialism the best compared to the other countries, it helped them grow as a country economically and in the government. Japan learned how to use the knowledge they gained on their own instead of letting other countries control them.